Look how far that's turning. That's way more than it originally had. We'll turn left and center. And it's actually really not that hard. I bought some boxes. And some stuff that go in the boxes. This is our rack and pinion. Now it doesn't look like a normal one. It's not a linear rack and pinion, it's a rotating rack and pinion. See, when I rotate this, that's a lot of spins. This is a few number of spins. Now there's a reason why I went with this style over the linear travel one. One, this one is more compact, takes up less space. And two, this uses the original tie rods. Also another issue of the linear one, to find ball joints that fit. They are all around 12 millimeters, while on the Polaris it's 10 millimeter like we measured. I would have to drill out the part on the Polaris, which means it wouldn't be original. And while I know we're already replacing a lot of stuff, we shouldn't, look for something that's original. At least if it breaks, I have something that's really the same. It's the exact same style mount as the original mechanism. It's just a different way of moving this kind of shape. From the old steering, we can see that it used these two little pivot points on this camshaft mechanism. So when we turn, those moves with it. And the cool thing about this, we have a bushing down here and a bushing up here. New steering rack, we can see how we have these two little holes right here. We can see that on the old unit, we have that same camshaft mechanism, but instead it's operated by this long shaft here. Somehow, if we mount this shaft through this open way back here, that way so we'd have two bearings and some steering way all the way to the front where I have it planned to be mounted. And then it'll be chain driven down to this little spline shaft right here. Okay, let me catch you up with something that I had been planning for a while. So previously, I bought this Polaris RZR 170 steering gear box. Basically, this one spins a lot, that one spins a little. Pretty basic. These are the tie rods from the Polaris Sportsman 500. And I already know that this plate here is the wrong plate for this. These holes together, too narrow, and the holes are both too big. I believe they're 12 mil, these are 10 mil. I was going to put a garage door chain sprocket on here. And the reason why is because I have garage door chain and I have a garage door sprocket. Just use what I have. And that there would have been the original handlebars actually be horizontally mounted up here, come up into here somewhere in the frame modification video, which you probably already saw. This part is going to be removed, so I would have area to get that shaft up in here, and there will be a sprocket, and there will be a chain that comes down behind here, and it mounts onto this, and this will sit right there. And then I'll have to modify this a little bit so these fit good. Now, that was what I was going to do. And the reason why I'm not is for two reasons. One, bump steer is an issue considering the axles for the front tires are right here, and they're in the same line as the lower A-arm. Since this is at a different location than that, we would have bump steer, which is not great, but that's not the real reason. This gearbox would have worked if it was put in the original place of where these heim joints connected to, which was on the opposite side. Remember, we flipped these shocks, so that way the control arm comes out this way, or they're facing forward, not reverse. Now that's part of the issue. Since this is designed the same way as these were supposed to be mounted on the opposite side, and since we flipped them, this is running in the opposite direction. Saying if we turn the steering wheel, to the left, spinning this way, that'll spin the chain, so this will push it this way. That pushes the tie rod to the right, pushes that tire out that way. Okay, so if I turn left, the tires will want to turn right, and vice versa. And I've already tried thinking how to flip this upside down, put it this way. If I do it this way, there's nowhere for the chain to go up, so I'd have to put this out like way out here in the front. If that's what I have to do, I really don't want to, because that puts these tie rods at a really bad angle too. This way, it puts the tie rods above up here, and so the chain would have to come out really far. Additionally, neither one of these ideas fit realistically in here. In short story, this barely fits, has bump steer, and it turns the wrong direction. So it looks like I'm gonna have to go with a conventional steering rack style that will take up all this room right here. Now that sucks because I already spent 60 bucks on this, and I'm gonna have to spend like another 60 bucks. So if this steering video is late, you know why. Got some Christmas presents. Got a few of them. So I've been waiting a while to unbox these. So we have a U-joint here. One side that's open, one side that's splined. Ooh, a shiny double U-joint. And we have two more of those. Two pillow blocks, an additional two in here. These are 3/4 inch. A 3/4 inch rod with flats milled on each side. Does that look familiar to you? This one's really gonna sell it what it actually is. Yep, it's another steering rack. Why did I buy another steering rack when I already had this one before? It's fine if you're putting this where the original steering shaft on the Polaris is. This is backwards for what we need. So, for the same amount of money as this, I got this as well as ball joints. So now we don't have to keep the original tie rods that we had before because we already have the steering rack, which is basically long enough to be most of the tie rod. I mean, that's how it's designed to be. Looks like we have a flat on one side and the rest of it is splined. See if that fits now. So why did I choose to go this route instead of this route? In a previous video, I explained that these were both options that I wanted to do, and that this was the one that I ended up going with. A second ago, I explained why this one wasn't working. Now, there's another reason why I couldn't do this. Probably seems like we're doing a bunch of time jumps here. You can see there is plenty of room to get this mounted in there. And there's room to get this input routed around all the funkiness that's going to be occurring in here. You will notice that these threads are different than these threads. These will not thread straight in. We're gonna have to do something about that. And no, the solution is not to use the ball joints that came with this. Even though this thread's on the here, this size here and that size is drastically different. I believe this is either M12 or M14, and that is M10. It's too big. And now there's the possibility of drilling this out to that size, but two reasons why I'm not going to do that. One, it makes these spindles not original. I know I'm ruining literally everything else, so why does that matter? It also means that these things are designed for that size of hole, which means if I make it bigger, I'm weakening all this material around here. I don't want to do that. The next reason would be I don't have that drill bit size, and even if I do buy it, we all know that's not going to be a straight hole, and so there's going to be like a wobble in it. It doesn't make sense to do that. So what I think I'm going to end up doing is the dumb way, which is probably the best way, is get another nut or two like this, you know, get a few of them on here, cut this tie rod here down, and then just weld this rod to these nuts on the end. That way, so we can still pop this off, pop it back on, we can make it shorter, longer, you know, still adjust it around this. It just has to be flipped all the way around, and then we don't have to, you know, deal with really messing up any of the parts, because this threaded rod, you know, it's just a threaded rod basically in the end, and any nuts we put on here are just random nuts, so we're not ruining our steering rack, we're not ruining any of this original structure and everything, and I think we can get that apply on both sides. So that leads to the next issue that I had here. Since I said that this was an input issue, how was I ever going to get power to this originally? Now, most of these are designed for shaft driven, so you have a shaft go into here, out to somewhere else. Obviously, this is the wrong direction for that. So how do we make an easy 90 degree to go up and then 90 degree go back? Because this is the front and that way it's the back. If you recognize this, this is a garage door gear. This is what comes out the top of your garage door, or however yours is set up. This is the basics of it. And not only did I salvage this from a garage door, I also salvaged all of the chain from the garage. So the idea was I was to take this gear, weld it onto some adapter or spline piece that I buy, shove on here, and then have it chain driven up to another one of these that I salvaged from another garage door, have it go up, pivot off of up there, and then go back. Now, there is an issue to that. So since our chain would go from here, behind this radiator, so if we look down from the top here, and this is why I had to remove that front like horn looking thing, you can see where that shaft is, come all the way through here. Now this is the next issue. Yeah, do you see where this breather box basically comes up? We'd have to have the chain come up all the way to like here-ish area, the clear to go all the way back, and here-ish sticks out a bunch up here, which would be fine, and we do have clearance for all that, but that angle that comes down here is kind of like that, and we need to come out here, which is not 90 degrees. It's less than that. So chain and the sprocket, you know, it only does like 90 degrees. Sure, we could put bearings in to make this chain flex and do that, but the idea of having this chain pop off at doing any reasonable speed and losing steering is an issue. I trust the strength of this chain, I just don't trust it popping off any sprockets or anything that we end up putting in. So moving back to this guy here, we have this angled U-joint here, straight up again, be right there, straight up here, all the way up to around here-ish, and then we throw this guy in there, our double U-joint. This can bend up to 70 degrees, which is around what we need. So we have the one here, and then we have another one around right here. Since this is going to bend it upwards to get it over the box, and we have to bend it back down, go straight through to right there, which is where the steering will end up being. So I only need 2 of these. I ordered 3 just in case. So we're going from steering rack to U-joint, go up through to a double U-joint, another double U-joint, straight through. We have a few of these. That's all gonna wobble around in here. That's what these 3/4 inch bearing blocks are there for. So we can mount this like right there. We should have plenty of room. We can drill some bolt holes, get that all mounted in there nice and easily like that. Additionally, we can probably shove another one down into here, you know, somewhere if we really need to. Then there's definitely going to be one right here where the steering wheel is going to be. I have the 4 of these to make everything line up. And so the rod, which is double D steering rod, and that's because it has 2 flats on each side, and this is 3/4 inch as well. Okay, so I think this is going to be angled like the way I'm currently holding it. It does line up like that. Of course, to get to this oil filter, we'll have to remove the steering. Yes, that's a pain, but realistically, we're just trying to make this work at this point. Like, I do have to remember, I have the exhaust right here, so I need to be careful to line the steering up as center as I can, because I need to have room for this exhaust to come out and around to get out of the way of all this. So obviously I don't want to cook my steering with the exhaust, blah, 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 blah. You see the picture. I think I've explained this too many times already. So what's step 1? It's realizing that this is not the double D standard of which our steering rod is. Why don't we just get a circular rod that matches this? Well, it's because all of our joints here are following the double D standard, because the outside diameter is 3/4 inch, same as our bearings. We can see that this slots in there just like that. Now we have a very strong, reliable connection. However, on the opposite side here, we cannot do such the same thing. So either we need to adapt this rod to fit this hole, or adapt this hole to fit this rod. I could just do all that chop, making sure everything lines up dead center instead of off center like that. We could just weld this bar straight to this. I bought 3 feet of this, so I can cut this in multiple spots to get the length that I need for all the sections. We need to know the throw length of how far this can shift over, and we need to know the number of turns this needs to actually go from full lock to full lock. So I've made this go all the way left. 3 turns get this from lock to lock. So that's about center. I'm gonna use my mat to count how far. These are inch measurements. So it's almost exactly 4 inches of throw, which means from center it moves around 2 inches. I don't know if that's going to be enough. I was looking at this and I realized that this plane right here is not the same plane that this input comes in, which means if I want this to be angled a little bit back, this has to be angled up even more. So I'm gonna have to make a plate that angles out a little bit. So that might make some of this mounting a little bit more difficult. Since last night we measured that this has 4 inches of throw, I need to see if these tires need more than that on the original leverage point. That is at 4 inches. That is at 9.5. For the 9.5, that's 5.5 inches. So we're gonna lose about 1.5 inches of distance that this can move total, which is around 3/4 of an inch from each full turn. So we will lose a hair bit of steering. That's still pretty darn close. That's what? It's about 73% of original steering. But then again, who knows? Maybe originally couldn't go full, you know, hub lock the hub lock. All I know is that the maximum that these hubs will allow at the turn, we're doing about 73% of that, which is good. We don't want it to, you know, over constrain whatever we got in here, but whatever. This is part of an old bed frame that's being scrapped. If I look at some of these notches that are in here, I can see that these bottom 2 line up really good. So what I'm thinking about doing is just cutting this little slice right here, 1 mount already made. Additionally, this bottom mount here lines up to with those 2, so I could steal that section as well. After this metal started hardening last time, I want to find metal that already has holes in it. I've marked 2 spots, so let's just cut it. This guy, mount on there like that. That way, so it's both in the narrow spot. Then I have this piece here, which lines up these 2 here, and there's no side to side on this one. Found some bolts out of the bag of Suzuki parts. I believe they're 8 mil. So that's bolted on there. Now to get this guy in. So there, now I have that all bolted and I didn't have to drill a single hole, which makes me ecstatic. The idea is that we're gonna be sitting on this front edge here and this back edge here, and that way so it's gonna prop it forward, which we need. Hopefully stay out of the way of the oil filter right here. I wanna be able to still remove that, obviously. There, the back has something to pin against and the whole front edge is able to weld. Plan of action, let's grind this down a little bit, put some tack welds for this in, and then see how the back lines up. I'm gonna try and do very light tack welds so I don't melt the boots. To be leaned a little bit forwards, actually. About there. I wish I could move this back further because I'm remembering now that the exhaust is gonna have to come around this or through here, and this moves this so much far forward that that's full back, and the aim it at that, that's all the way pivoted back. Only having that much travel further back, really don't like. It shouldn't need much more than that. It's gonna be close. I'll tack the rear mount in and then I'll take this off and see what we got. Okay, there we go. So the back is now tacked in. I just measured the flat to flat distance. It turned out to be 0.55 inches. And so I measured the inside of the flats on here, and turns out also exactly 0.55 inches. The more I move the shaft off center, the more it's gonna wobble around. So if I get that close to center, all I need to do is cut that off and maybe weld this bar in. So let's cut that. So now we have the slot that's been widened. This guy now should be able to slide in there. So all the way down it will go. It's fairly aligned, but for testing right now, that's gonna work good. So right here is where we're trying to line up. We need to slide down from up top here. And there we go. Yeah, because I got plenty of room this way. And then when I get to the back here, I'm gonna start binding. Okay, so I trimmed it out. So the bar is now in line with this. Downside is it's a little bit wobbly right now. So I'll have to make sure whatever I do is in line. There is an issue. The U-joint here is touching this oil line right there, which is not good. Let's see, do we have still motion though? Yeah, it is rubbing against it, which I don't like. That is actually quite perfect though, otherwise. Okay, so that's good. So I guess just for the sake of this, let's shift this over maybe a quarter of an inch so we're away from this line. This line has caused me so many issues in pretty much everything I've done over here. Such a pain. Did it just start raining? Oh, it's starting to rain. There we go. Okay, so it fits without rubbing. That's nice. Issue is this thing's been moved so far forward now that this doesn't angle back enough. Dang, I put everything away and it stopped raining. I'm waiting till later because I know if I pull it out, it's gonna start raining again. I waited half an hour and it didn't start raining again, so I guess I'm gonna be continuing working in the dark. Also, the mics didn't want to pair, so I guess time-lapse time to get this done. There we go. You can see I have a lot of front and back wiggle room, a lot of side to side, and we're not interfering with anything. Okay, so steering rack is now mounted. Next. Okay, so that's about center. Now, if I make the wheels center, I'll know that I have about this much room to get this all lined up. I think the plan is I'm gonna run off to the hardware store, get some more M12 nuts, because I know I certainly don't have any more of that. Cut this rod around here, and then weld the nuts to the rod. That way, so, you know, we'll have a little bit of an extension. I think I'll do it on the other side, because then it'll give me a little bit more range that I'm lacking. One thing I noticed is even though I've realigned how this shaft goes into this U-joint, this spline down here is not in line with the center. So that means no matter what we do, this is always going to want to shift over to one side more than the other. Which means here, when I just had it clamped, it was wanting to move this around a lot. And you can really tell I didn't weld this in the back because it's flexing a lot. I hope that's okay for now. However, that means that we can't put the bearing down there. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to put the bearing up at the top. Maybe making it a further distance away will give it more room. I don't know. That bearing's clamped now. Give this a spin. Oh, well, that's significantly better. Still flexing a little bit, but it's still a lot better. Now the downside of this is the bearing can't be here. It has to be lower because up here has to be the double U-joint. It needs to be in here. Yeah, this is going to be an issue. I really don't know where to hide the bearing down here. I suppose the most important part is getting this in there. So this thing can go past 90 degrees, but only in some of these angles. You can see that's past 90. However, if I put it in some angles like this one, that's probably like 80. So 75 is probably the most useful because then, you know, we're not hitting these edges on each other. So this is the nut that goes on the end of the steering rack. Turns out it's M12 by 1.25. And I realized, well, I'm going to buy more of these when I already have the original ball joints that go on the end. These things are threaded throughout the whole thing on the inside. So why don't I just cut this off and weld to this? this? Well, I checked a magnet and it doesn't stick to it. And additionally, I thought, well, why don't I try welding to it? I don't know if you see that, but that's a hole directly through it. That took a while to clean out the threads, but yeah, definitely cast aluminum. Went to the hardware store. Some are lock nuts, some are regular. I just tried the lock nuts, can't use them. They start stripping out the threads on the end of it. Plus it starts actually swiveling the ball joint on the inside of the rack, so I can't do that. So I have only the 3 that were left at Home Depot, the 2 that came on the threaded rod, and additionally, since the inside and the outside of this ball joint are the same thread pitch, we can also use the castle nuts that went on these. I don't really want to use these, but they are the same diameter as the new nuts that I just bought. And if it comes down to it, I could grind out the pinched areas of the lock nut. Actually, that might be a better idea. I can't believe it. It just started raining. So I'm using the original nut, lock nut. That may sound counterintuitive, but because the lock nut ground down that, so we got rid of all of the part that was pinched. I'm adding now other ones that are going to be welded. Need to have a little bit of room for the lock. Get out the 8-foot straight edge. Finally, that's straight. Ball joint. Tire was significantly easier to center. 16th over 2.5. 16th over 2.5. Okay, so that's center. The steering rack is way off. Well, if I want equal turning radius both sides of the side, I should just make the rack center. I don't know why I'm fiddling with all of this. I need the cut threaded rod. That's one. Gas clamp there. Find out how this goes. Ooh, now to do a better weld. Oh, much better. I can actually see now. And I can still rotate it freely. Awesome. Okay, let's let that cool down and let's do the other side. Now it's actually welded in. So now, if I turn the rod, we should see it steer. Probably not well, because it's not finished being welded, but still want to see it. Look at that. Okay, that's full left. That's full right. You know, it's actually not that bad to steer either. I guess we can see if there's any bump steer on this. Probably has a little bit, but yeah, it goes a hair bit in when it goes down, but I'm fine with that. Finally, the wheels don't flop in and out when I roll it. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm gonna let this cool down. I think any more welding on it might get to the boots. These rods are still fairly warm, and I can touch them, but you know, I don't want to push it any more than I have to. About 2 weeks later, this is where our input shaft comes in from the front. I was going to have it routed over all this and then to here, which is where I want the steering wheel. Now there's an issue. One, I don't have enough room right here anymore, so I think I'm gonna have to notch this tube right here. That should give me the clearance. And I thought I was gonna go around this airbox thing because this is where the throttle and choke wires come in. And so I really don't want to have the steering shaft, you know, interfere with that, but we might have to, because if I go around this, well, then we're covering up the spark plugs. And I really don't feel like disassembling my steering to be able to change spark plugs. So we're gonna have to go over this vent. I think we're just gonna have to go over the cable mounts back to here, which is where this bearing here is going to sit on top of there. I think we should maybe work backwards now. I think this is gonna be a little bit more complicated than I thought. The only thing is, once it gets back to that back bearing there, it has to be straight. And it has to be straight because if it's not, then the steering wheel is gonna be at a funky angle. Okay, so now let's head back to the front. Yeah, so now you can see we don't have that much room in here yet. If we stick one of these U-joints in there, there's enough room to get it to slid in, because there's room underneath this bar, and that's really what we're hitting there, and then the case of the engine. So if we give ourselves a little bit more room here by notching this out, I think we have enough room to do a full articulation of this. I'll cut it a little bit long, so marked it there. And you can see that it's actually not that far. See, we have a bunch of extra there from that cut. So hopefully we'll be able to have all this extra beam for the steering all the way to the front. Put it all the way through here into that bearing back there. I think we might just have enough. Right here's our cut mark. I am gonna have to get 2 of these in there, so I'll be able to extend it by, you know, about that much twice. Hopefully that'll end up working out. This is a fairly clean cut, cleaned up. Let's go put these in and see how they fit. You can just slot that on there like that. U-joint, it's gonna have to come down from the top. Actually, I think we're gonna have enough room just like that. However, there is an issue. Yeah, right in here. We have plenty of room this way, but the downside now is look at the angle we're coming up at. Yeah, we could basically almost do that, which we can't have. We have to have it go this way. Oh, you know what? Actually, it does fit that way. However, we have the issue now that it's going up. So yeah, we're gonna have to have another U-joint bar right here, pointing it back down to the direction we need. There, that's a little better. Now I can't pick up everything. I just tightened it up. So now this guy gonna have to come in there. Wow, there's barely any room at all for this. Yeah, because right now this bar right here is not going to reach that back bearing anyway. Yeah, that's how much movement we have. It's not enough, especially when I rotate this, the whole bottom shaft there pivots. And I can't put this guy right here because then we'll directly be covering the cables. Maybe I'm just going to have to. Maybe around here, right around here-ish. I want to keep this as long as I can because we're going to be short here anyway, but there we go. I truly do not understand daylight savings. The sun is setting. It's 4 o'clock. Do you see that? It's 4:30 and the sun is setting. Okay, see how that fits. There we go. Now we can get this one in. Okay, fit through there. Now we can fit our final link in here. Hopefully there's enough here. Oh yeah, yes there is. It's locked in. Now, should have steering all the way up there, all the way to the front. Before I put in any of these bearings in here to like hold all of this in place, I'm gonna spin this. We're gonna see how wild this all goes. Yeah, see, that's why we have to have bearings. Funnily enough, it actually is moving the tires a little bit. This rod right here that we're hitting up against, I could lower this, but then that means all of this has to be raised up quite a bit, and then we'll hit like right here more. I mean, we're very close to hitting that. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out this little rod right here, and since this actually isn't welded to this plate here, I think if I just do a cut there and a cut there, that little slice will come right out. We'll have plenty of room to work in here, and we'll still have our mounting plates for our oil cooler. This is all for the weight of the tire, the structure of the motorcycle, which is gone. So we don't really need that extra little bit of strength right there. So let me cut this out real quick. I think I'm gonna flip the blade on the saw and then go from the outside. You know, I don't know if this is gonna work. Let's give this a try real quick. At least I have a groove started. Wow, that was fantastic. It cut right through it. There we go. Yeah, it's not welded in at all. Now, we flip this back in through here. Hopefully now, I have a little bit more room for all this. Oh yeah, look at that. That's a bunch of clearance now. So now if I go and turn this, a lot more floppy. Now, since I can't fit a bearing right here, I can fit one up here. So, yeah, so that bearing is now clamped in. So now if I turn this, okay, cool. I need to raise this up a little bit. You can see I left myself some extra material and whacked it with a hammer a few times. You can see I slid it down maybe around 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch. Let's get this thing mounted in. There we go. That's that. Now I can slide this around a little bit and lock it in tight. If we look at the top, now we have that little bit of extra movement. Yeah, but now we're not hitting the vent. So let's get a bearing down there. But for the record, this is our 3rd bearing we're putting in. This is super temporary. Dang. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Yeah, you see that? That's why it's not gonna work. Yeah. Perhaps if I can somehow get this bearing in there. If I put that there, so that's all secure, the bottom secure. The only thing is, yeah, this one right here. I'm just gonna hold that for the second, and I'm gonna twist it back here. Let me clamp that one. Okay, so now none of it moves. Twist this, just the bearing moving around. Dang. You know, I'm gonna lift up the whole front of this so I can turn the wheels easy. There. Okay, so now we're in the air. Careful. Yeah, this shouldn't be difficult to turn. It is. Okay, so down here turns fine. It's right here that's the issue. Now, I think my biggest issue is this bearing block here. I'm just gonna loosen it just for a second. If I turn this, how much does that really want to move? That is my issue. Yeah, it's all bound up now. So I spent a while trying to figure out why this wasn't working. Because like, obviously we have more than 90 degrees here of turning. What I didn't realize is that when we turn this, look at this, that's no longer 90 degrees and that's full locked. So what's happening is it was pulling up on my joints and it was locking them when these 2 inner pieces hit the center. Now the reason why that these can move so far is because the holes here, these little arms here, go into the hole and makes it you can turn farther. However, for these joints, they stop because, well, the center doesn't have a hole. So what I was going to do is I was going to take out the center of this and then drill holes into that to make it bigger. However, I can't find the circlip in there and they don't hammer out like normal, so I'm just going to put all these screws back in and I'm going to go in there with the Dremel when this is full lockout like this, clean up that center and see how much more angle I can get out of this. After a few configurations of bearings and the U-joints and stuff, this is the best I got. You can see I can twist down here and the full thing rotates. I have a bearing at the beginning, bearing up here right before this U-joint. I have a bearing right after that U-joint. That's because these are offset a little bit, so its U-joint shifts it up and then it kind of angles it down to this U-joint, and we have a bearing right after it. Now you may notice this is sticking out this way and not down. That's because when I remove this, it still rotates down. It has a hard time, and the reason why, if I remove this real quick, you'll be able to see that the flex angle of this is really weird. That's almost at 90 degrees as of right there, when before 90 degrees, you know, looks like this. So why the heck can it do this? Well, that's because they designed these to where there's a flat bottom here, and you probably can't see that, but I shaved all of that out, so this can flex a lot. I didn't shave it here on this side, so the bottom has a really hard stop there, but the top does not, so I get a lot more angle. So the top one's been shaved, and that makes this flex really good, but the bottom, since it hasn't been, it hits that hard stop early, and it hits a point to where it just can't turn anymore. I need to either shave out more of this one, or I need to add a second double U-joint. Right now this one caves down, and this side is straight flat. So I'll shave that, and we'll see how it fits next. So now I just kind of tightened it back on here real quick. I can see that when I rotate this out here, that's still fine. Rotate it at 90 degrees. Seems to be fine. I mean, sure, it's wobbling around a lot, but let's constrict that with the bearing. Now when I twist it, oh, that's smooth. No restriction. So you can see now this front shaft lines up with the U-joint input for the steering rack. So I'm going to go around. So this is our input. Oh yeah, I can just turn that by hand. I don't need this anymore. There's no binding. Yeah, that's what the issue was the whole time, was that one U-joint wasn't clearanced properly. Go the opposite way. Not binding there. Now I have to come back to this dilemma. We're like 1 inch short, which sucks. And I can't pull this down anymore out of the U-joint, because the whole point of this working is that it's higher now. Now see, if I push it up, it rotates, and if I pull it down, it locks up. How do I fix that? I think what I'm going to do is, since I have extra on the steering column, I'm going to cut off maybe 1.5 inches from that and then weld it back to this, which sucks that I have to do that, but I'm not going to go out and buy another one of these shafts just to cut another one this length. So hey, at least we have this all mocked up now. Like tack welded this strip in right here to hold the bearing block to keep it centered, because the clamps are still sliding. I removed this piece that I had here because it kept on flexing. I flipped the bearing to a different spot. These guys have been doing surprisingly really well, but this U-joint right here keeps on getting locked up no matter like the spot it gets in. And the only way I can adjust tension here, by loosening these 2 bolts here, the shaft can start to move forward and back a little bit, so I can adjust how much is in here and how much angle that this thing has to deal with. I just realized that I'm locking up because this can't bend more than like 15 degrees. Look at that. That's it. That's full lock. So I'm gonna have to go and clearance out these, and that's the reason why this thing's been binding up, because it can't push back any further and it stays at this really weird angle. Guess we'll find out how well this actually has been fitting up. The frame and everything right now is all black. I mean, sure, I've ground some stuff back, but for the majority, it's going to be black. Now, there's some parts, you know, that are silver, like the engine, like these spindles down here, like the aluminum casting, you know, anything that's aluminum cast is going to be silver. However, if we look over here, the rims are originally black, and I painted this hub from like a brownish kind of color. Pretty sure it's supposed to be black, so I painted it black. But we can change this color, and since we're doing tires, might as well, you know, spruce this up a little bit, repaint all this. So what color do you think the rim should be? If the frame's gonna be black, there's accents of silver, should this be silver, or it should be some kind of third color? Let me know in the comments. Been outside for a few hours, 37 degrees out, but I think it can steer now, so bring it in. that didn't look too bad. And you'd be right, because I cut every single time of me bringing this thing back into the garage with the wheels flopping all around. That was so nice to just pull it in, make little adjustments on the rods, because every single time I move this in, I pull it, the tires flop around a little bit, so you have to keep pushing them back into place. These axles keep on wanting to get stabbed into the tire enough to where I'm gonna have to do some diff repair. But yeah, now I can just roll it in and I can steer it. Now, there is 2 issues right now that we're gonna have to fix. One is that I needed another bearing, so I robbed one from right here for right now. So that means that this flops around a little bit. This U-joint flops around a little bit. So I'll order another replacement. That's not imperative for this video to get in there. I'll order that, plop that in another day. But the main thing is we have this bearing mounted here. We have this plate mounted again. This plate's probably been welded in, grinded out, welded back in maybe 4 times now. I've clearanced out all the insides of these U-joints and these edges on both of them. That took another like hour to get that one done, which means we have 2 hours of like U-joint grinding. And additionally, I took apart an old project to get this other galvanized plate that has the holes punched out of it, and that's welded here in the corners, because I had this one in here and this one was still just flopping around way too much, so I added another bearing up here. This bearing plate, I don't remember if I showed this or not, but I welded this plate in. Yes, it's 2 sections because I didn't have a piece long enough. I might replace it later on. I might not. The oil cooler is going to end up covering this, but this is definitely going to have to get welded in, something like this. And I specifically made it to the bearing is touching this U-joint at the exact height that this U-joint needs to stay to be able to move properly. Now when I move this wrench, it spins through this bearing, through this U-joint that steps it up and down at an angle, goes down these 2 bearings into this U-joint that goes at quite literally a 90-degree angle. So you can see it comes in like that, right through there, comes down here at that angle. And then enters this U-joint here where this is just tack welded again, and that goes into our rack. Now, I said there's 2 issues. One is that bearing's missing. The other issue is that I didn't weld the back of this because I can't get back there. And since I'm going to have to do diff work later on, I figured that when I take the whole engine out and everything, I'll weld the back of this bracket. And it's really apparent. Only the front of this is welded. And the reason why I say it's really apparent is that this whole thing flexes. If you look right here, if I turn this, yeah, you can see that moving. So yeah, and it's not only that the back is not welded, it's that the whole frame part that I welded onto isn't really that strong. So I'm going to have to do some extra bracing. But for now, let me put up on the jack and I'll show you how easy it is to steer. This isn't going to be good for a real world test just because we need to have the tires sliding and skidding and stuff. But for now, just to show you, it'll be worth it. There we go, wheels are off the ground. Now when I turn this, yeah, that was as easy as it was before. Wow, this actually is flexing now. I didn't even realize how bad it's doing that. Now the important part, look how far that's turning. That's way more than it originally had. Oh, my U-joint popped out. That's full turn. So we can full turn right, full turn left, and center. And it's actually really not that hard. Given it shouldn't be because we're in the air right now, but when it's on the ground, it's really not that bad besides the steering rack mount flexing, which we'll get to later. But yeah, now we got steering, finally. I've been worrying about that for so long to be able to get this in right. But hey, it's in now. Let's say from center, right here, 1.5 turns from center is full lock. That means from full lock to full lock is 3 turns, just under. Okay, I can't put the oil cooler on because I put these bolts on backwards. But now that the concept is there, let me flip these around and see if that still fits fine. It's touching a little bit, and it's this one that's doing it. Dang, I thought I could get away with that. Guess not.